This meeting is being recorded.
All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to ACEL8420, Leadership and Administration. Today, a guest lecture, a special guest, Bill Raison, Fire Chief. Full disclosure, you got the last name. Yes, he's my younger brother.
Younger,
but
that's an important point.
It's an important point, younger. And thinking about crisis, though, and we were talking about leadership and administering during a crisis, Bill does have 25 plus years in the fire service, hazmat, rescue, crisis incident command, certified advanced EMT. And I'm not even going to go into his former work in the FBI or his international work. He's just done a lot of things, and he's got a lot of experience. So I thought this would be a great topic. So here's the premise. This graduate course, theory and practice. Emergency response understands crisis. Responses extend way beyond fire and rescue, though. And I hope you'll tell the story about the hospital, largest regional hospital in the area in Southern Ohio that was nearly shut down because of a water crisis. So with that as the setting, I'm going to stop the screen share. Here are the two questions. How does a leader best respond during a crisis? And with COVID's vaccine projections extending out maybe another 6 or 8 months, what should leaders focus on to continue managing through the crisis? And thank you. I don't think I said thank you. It's my brother, you know, but thank you for jumping on and spending some time with my class, Bill. I really appreciate it. So leadership and crisis, tell me some of the things you've faced and how to best go about it.
Well, I think probably first and foremost, when you think about leadership during crisis, it sounds almost frightening. And it has been my experience that actually crisis leadership is easier than day-to-day operations of leadership. And a lot of that, I think, stems from the fact that when you're in crisis, people tend to focus. If you do it right, if you do it wrong, it's going to be difficult. But if you do it right, I think it's actually easier.
Oh, because your team is focused on the thing, the problem.
Yeah. And so okay. a lot of the little things that are kind of frustrating day-to-day operations that you have to deal with kind of disappear into the background, and people are now really focused on what the issue is. Again, you have to do it right. If you're not giving people what they need, it's going to be bad. But and I think when you look at that, you're in a crisis, and you alluded to the incident at the hospital, and
tell that story. That was a fascinating. So first, I see what you mean about the crisis. Those small things, because we're really focused, disappear. I hadn't even thought about that. But then you still got the crisis to respond to. So tell the story of the hospital. That's a fascinating, your response was fascinating, your team.
Yeah. So, and that happened, here in Portsmouth, Southern Ohio Medical Center, which is a regional hospital. I actually got a call on a Saturday afternoon. I'm sitting at home. It was summer. I'm sitting at home, actually, on the back patio, cooking out. And I get a call from the facilities manager, Justin Clark, and he's in full blown crisis at that point. The city had suffered a major water break, and it happened at the worst possible time. That's usually crisis occurs when it's never one thing. It's a series of events that unfold to create the crisis. And that was what the city had, a big water line project. To make a long story short, that the break that they then suffered just compounded things. So the hospital had no water, and he called me and he said, I don't know what we're going to do. He said, how do I run a hospital without water? He said, we've already received numerous complaints. Someone called the Ohio Department of Health and said, that Southern Ohio Medical Center was a giant sweltering Scotty's potty, because they couldn't flush the toilets. They couldn't wash their hands. They couldn't do anything.
Holy cow.
So he said, we're pulling together our crisis response team, And I said, well, give me 20 minutes and I'll be there. So, when you think about crisis leadership, and we'll talk about this some more, but being present is one of the key things in a crisis. Is actually
Show up.
show up, be there, get out of your office, and be there. So, we did. We got together pretty quickly. We met with their team and we started just going through different ideas that could get the hospital up and moving again. And to make it's a long story. But to make a really long story short, we came up with a plan to actually pump water into the hospital using a fire truck. And then we had to reach out to a lot of local resources because we had to shuttle water to do that, which is not something, without getting into a lot of stuff about the fire service. But, in the city, we operate off fire hydrants. Well, that doesn't work when your water system's down.
The water system's down, so you didn't have the. So did you have a protocol to start that discussion or to formalize the brainstorming? Or, I mean, how did you know what to do when you've got a hospital full of patients and they're talking about moving those folks because they're basically out of options and everybody's pretty freaked out?
Yeah. So
what's your protocol?
And well, there was no protocol, which that happens sometimes. It was a scenario that really had never been really thought of, and they were literally about to just shut the entire hospital down. Which the impact of which, and I talked to my team when all of this was happening. I said, of all of the incidents that we've dealt with, and definitely my 30-year career in the department, but I think really in the history of the department, is probably the most significant incident that we ever dealt with, and
The loss of human life.
Oh,
It'd been massive.
without a doubt. When you think about the only emergency room you have in town is now, for the region, really, it is now not available. So, emergency patients have to be shipped out of the county to other hospitals. Patients, especially critical patients that are in the hospital, that have to be shipped to other hospitals.
So how did you solve it? That's the piece I'm looking for.
Yeah.
How do you know what to do? Yeah.
Yeah. So, we really just, we came up with the idea, well, if we could just pump water into the building, and we had no idea at that point if it would work. Their maintenance supervisor just was an outstanding resource. He's been there for many years, and he knew every valve in that hospital, and he knew how to isolate the main lines coming in. And
so there was some luck involved.
There was,
an old timer but your process was, and I'm always going back to the process. You pulled everybody together. You got the critical people. Someone recognized that this long-term guy, an old guy, like us, would have that knowledge, specialized knowledge, which made all the difference. Because up until you got him, if I recall the story when we've talked before, there wasn't another way to fix this.
Right. Yeah, we really didn't have a lot of options. The initial conversation was to pump into the fire department connection, which is used to boost the sprinkler systems if you have a fire in the building.
Okay, so you were able to use almost a loophole, if you will, to backfeed to get the water in there.
Yeah, but we ended up actually not doing that. We ended up pumping into a fire hydrant that was on the main line. That was why it was so critical that he had the knowledge to be able to isolate that line. So then we had a fire hydrant right there that normally you get water out of. Well, we pumped into that. We had to use a lot of the area volunteer fire departments because they are the experts in shuttling water. They're out in rural areas where they don't have water supply systems. So, we reached out, we brought those folks in, and we ended up 12 days. We pumped water into that hospital for 12 days. So the longest water shuttle operation in the history of the state. but we got the entire hospital back up and operating. They were able to go back to having surgeries. They were able to open up their offices for people to have their routine visits because all of that was shut down.
Oh, so yeah, so they were canceling appointments and
Yes.
colonoscopy, everything.
Yes. Everything. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So process wise, it was get the folks together, find the critical people, have the tabletop conversations, and that's the incident command center. And as you know, I did that kind of work when I was in private industry.
Right. Yeah.
The same emergency response protocols, and then it sounds like you had multiple solutions, and you came up with the one that would work the best. But then you also had contingencies of being able to say, well, if we need to move people, then because I'm guessing that Justin and the other folks were lining up those ambulance services and region other hospitals,
Right.
within 50
Yeah.
miles.
To start that process.
Okay. Okay.
And that, you always need to have contingencies because situations can evolve. They can be really fluid.
So getting out of that, I'm just watching our time. Larger picture and more general response to crisis and thinking about crisis leadership. We've got COVID, is looking to extend. So whether it's not just the fire or an emergency service or a hospital, but small nonprofits, local businesses, government agencies who have people who are sick, looking forward as this whole COVID thing still is, lingering around. What's your kind of idea on how we hang in there, I guess, or what you would say to an organization, what do you say to your team? Because you certainly have people who can be impacted by this just as well. I remember when you set up a temporary fire station so you could spread out your employees so they wouldn't be in contact with each other, just in case one group got sick, you could still have coverage, which was I had never even thought about that. So looking forward, what do you think?
Well, I think it's
it's the crystal ball.
yeah. A lot of it goes back to you have to, the things that you do in the beginning of a crisis, when you have a drawn out crisis, you have to continue to do.
Okay.
So, I look back at the whole COVID thing when COVID first started, and actually I was literally 3 or 4 days away from getting on an airplane and going to Honduras.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Your mission trip.
We were doing there. And I came in and the whole COVID stuff was really starting to hit home here in the United States. And I came in and you could just feel the tension in the department, and nobody knew what was happening, what was going to happen. There was a lot of uncertainty. There was a lot of anxiety over that. So, one of the first things I did was I called the team that I was supposed to leave the country with, and I said, "Hey guys, I can't leave. This is not the time for me to be, in another country. I've got to be here." And which they understood. And as it turned out, none of them went, because a few days later, even
down the borders,
they shut everything down. So it's funny because if we'd have gone, we'd have been stuck in Honduras for at least a period of time. But so I called everybody in and set everybody down. And again, I go back to that. When you're in crisis as a leader, you have to be present, and you have to be present in a real and tangible way. I think back September 11th, 2001, and you look at what happened on that day, and George Bush is an example of, in that time, a really good example of what being a present leader, being there on the ground. He went to New York. He's there at ground zero. Be easy for him to just stay in Washington, D.C., where it was a lot safer and logistically, because, I've had the opportunity to deal with those presidential visits, to our city.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, there's a lot that goes into bringing the president of the United States someplace.
Yeah.
And so it would have been a lot easier for him
teams,
to not have done that, but he did. and he's there and he's on the ground and he sees an opportunity. Again, people are uncertain. People are afraid. People,
Yeah.
they need to know their leaders there. And if you recall, and people like us who are, as you pointed out, old, remember, but there's a point where he's there at ground zero and he grabs a megaphone and he starts talking to people,
I
just
remember
totally
that.
unscripted. He's just talking to people because people need to
America,
hear
it
that.
was just on
You know,
TV live because everyone was watching TV all day for live coverage. So yeah, tell that story quickly.
yeah. So if you remember, he's talking and someone yells out from the crowd, "We can't hear you." And you remember his response? "But I can hear you." And that's big because people, they want to know that their leaders hear their concerns. Their leaders understand and are there with them. They're just not on their own. And so, that was kind of go back to the, fast forward back to the COVID thing, and getting everybody together, listening to their concerns, being honest that we don't have all the answers to this problem right now. But we're going to work through them, and we're going to take the best practices that we can, that we know today, and we're going to put those into place. We're going to have a plan. Be clear. Clarity is huge. People want clarity. And when they don't have it, it just adds to the anxiety. It adds to the uncertainty, which makes it difficult for them to focus on the task. So they need a clear path to follow, even if they don't necessarily agree with the path that you're on. At least they know they're on a path,
Yeah.
and they're moving, in some kind of direction.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, not just sitting by. I remember you telling me that we
right.
talked about this months ago, and you telling me that there was a palpable difference, a clear felt difference in your folks at the fire station after you had that meeting. That
Yeah,
people
at the end of that meeting, you could feel the
visibly,
tension. Yeah, you could feel the tension leave the room, and everybody just kind of took a collective sigh of relief that,
yeah,
at least, okay, there is some kind of plan. And as the situation moved forward, that plan got adjusted a lot. I mean, we've seen that on a national scale.
sure,
It's at some level, it's a moving target, because as we learn more about the virus and how to treat it and how to protect people from it, there's been a lot of changes along the way. And
yeah,
that's the reality of really leadership and management on any level, but definitely during a crisis, and so I think being flexible, and then being able to, when you're doing something and it's not working, being able to say, "Hey, that's not working."
let's
I
shift
always
gears.
like to, I tell people all the time, just because you spend a long time making a wrong decision is no reason to continue to make that decision, and so then you're back to being honest. It's kind of a cycle. So you're back to being honest with your people
Yeah,
and saying, "Hey, we tried this, it's not working, or we have new information, we've learned more, so we're gonna adjust the plan," and being honest about that, being clear about that, and then continuing to move forward. And you have to continue. You can't just do it and then walk away. You have to continue to do it. And that's where we are. Back to your question. I know at some point we would get back to this question, right?
to moving forward.
It's like a politician.
Hey,
Don't answer the question you ask. I'll answer the question that I wish you had asked. And
not a good
um,
crisis management approach.
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
um, you have to continue to manage the situation. You have to
Mhm.
continually go back and have those conversations, listen to what people are telling you, um, and understand, the frustrations and the anxieties that they have, and be able to, at the very least, be able to listen and let them know that they've been heard. People definitely want to be heard. They want their voices to be heard. So
Yeah. And in that crisis mode, particularly. So,
yeah, and we just have to continue that going forward with this current situation.
yeah,
Just have to
until we're
continue to
through.
do those things, you
Yeah.
know.
Well, it's,
I read a really,
oh,
I
go
read a
ahead.
really good book. I read a really good book by Dr. Henry Cloud. It's called Integrity. The
Oh, yeah.
subtitle is The Courage to Meet the Demands of Reality.
I
Excellent book.
love
I would
him.
highly recommend that. Yeah, very good stuff. But one of the things he talks
What's
about
his
as a
main
leader,
premise?
yeah, and as a leader, he said you have to get people to follow you, and then periodically you have to look back and make sure that they're still following you. And if they're not, then you have to go back and do the things you did again to keep people moving in the right direction.
Yeah, that
So,
that circle, that circular path. Well, you hit on, like, I started to say 4 or 5, but there's probably 6 or 8 key topics of theoretical constructs that we have talked about all semester in this grad course on authenticity, transparency, honesty, communication, over communication, listening, just critical pieces of normal leadership and administration, not to mention when you throw crisis on top of it. And so, just from a time standpoint, I want to not kill my students. I always try to do that with brief lectures. Man, I am so appreciative. I got to tell everybody, I'm so proud of my little brother for the work you've done for so many years, your dedication, and the respect, the calls that you get, state, national, internationally. I am proud of everybody, I'll tell you. And I appreciate you talking to my class, because you did some good things, said some good things, and it fits right in with our context. So thank you. And I'll stop recording. And thanks everybody for listening. Have a great week.